So for the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about salvation, about how salvation is primarily a gift of God through Jesus the Christ, and about how it is more than where we spend eternity, how it is as much about the here and now as it is about our heavenly destination. And we've also been talking about how it is more involved than simply saying, I believe in Jesus. Last week, if you were here, you'll remember we talked about this idea of working out our own salvation, about how we are called to be participants with God in this idea of salvation, how we are to respond to God's free offer of grace with faith, and then spend our entire life working with God's grace as we mature in our faith, as we seek to become more Christ-like in our daily lives and in our interactions with others. So today, as I promised last week, I'd like to talk about how salvation, or our relationship with God, is more than just a personal matter between us and God, how it's not simply about getting ourselves right with God, but rather includes or is intended to culminate in a transformation that not only affects our relationship with God, our personal salvation, if you will, but that also changes or transforms our relationship to the rest of God's good creation. In other words, our faith, which begins with God's grace at work in us even before we are aware of it. Remember, John Wesley calls that prevenient grace, and every good Methodist should learn that term. But that grace at work in us before we're aware of it enables our response to that grace, which is faith or justification. And that faith, our response, should make a difference, not only in our own individual lives, but also in the way we relate to other people, and in the way we relate to the complex systems in which we all live. So to recap a bit from last Sunday, John Wesley understood salvation and faith as that lifelong journey of growing in perfect love of God and neighbor, and never as a simply personal relationship with the God who created us. And again, while this faith always begins as a result of God's grace at work in us first, it doesn't end with our saying yes to God's offer of a relationship. In other words, it's not a one and done kind of deal. Faith, salvation, is a continuing process of growing in God's grace, a journey of transformation in which we are transformed by our relationship with God in Christ. And then that transformation affects not only how we relate to God, our own faith, but also how we relate to other people, and how we put our faith in action for the transformation of our world. Last week I mentioned that the mission statement of the United Methodist Church is making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. It's not about just becoming a disciple. We become disciples so that we can then go out and change the world of which we are a part. It involves taking this gift, this free gift of God's grace, and our response of faith, and through that grace and faith working together, we're supposed to go out and transform or make a difference in our world. It's about becoming kingdom people, if you will. About working with God to make God's kingdom come in fullness or completeness on earth as it is in heaven. It's about continuing the work, the mission, and ministry, the kingdom of God which Jesus lived and taught, and yes, even died for. I think I've said this before, but one of my favorite theories of the atonement according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary being the reconciliation of God and humankind through the sacrificial death of Jesus the Christ. My favorite theory of the atonement that's found in the New Testament, and there are 5 different theories, by the way, but the one I prefer is called Christus Victorious, or Christ Victorious. And basically it means that in the death and resurrection of Jesus the Christ, God overcame the evil powers of this world that led to Jesus' crucifixion. Jesus' life was about changing hearts, and it was also about changing the corrupt systems of the world that culminated in the oppression of many of God's children. And because his teachings threatened the powers of those in charge, they killed him, hoping that that would be the end of all this kingdom nonsense, this kingdom revolution, if you will, the one he lived and breathed and taught, a revolution that called on God's people to not only care for the least, the last, and the lost, but to also challenge the actual systems that kept so many of God's children on the bottom or on the outside looking in. Remember last week we also talked about salvation as wholeness or completeness? For Jesus, that wholeness or that completeness was intended to extend to all of God's creation, i.e. the transformation of the world, including creation itself. And that's why issues like ecology and how we treat God's creation or salvation issues, as well as how we treat God's children. So those of us who have received this free gift of God's grace, God's love, God's mercy, those of us who have claimed it for ourselves through faith, we have inherited the responsibility of working to build God's kingdom here on earth, in the here and now, just as Jesus sought to do. It's part and parcel of what John Wesley, echoing the author of Philippians, meant when he said we are to work out our own salvation. And again, and I can't say this enough, first and foremost, our salvation, our response of faith, always begins with the gift of God's grace. Apart from God's grace working in us, we could not even respond with faith, much less anything else. But it's also something that we as Christians, we who call ourselves saved, are to be working on throughout our lifetime. It's a journey that we never complete. The good news in all of this is that we don't undertake this journey alone. This working out of our salvation is not something we do in a vacuum. God's grace is always with us, working in us and through us to bring about our transformation and then, of course, course, the transformation of the world. So what does that really mean? The author of James puts it bluntly when he says faith without actions, or some translations say faith without works, is dead. Yet as harsh as that sounds, I think the idea he's trying to convey to those early Christians and to us is that true faith, true discipleship born out of an authentic relationship with God, is our natural response to God's gift of grace, our faith. That we are so changed by this relationship with God that we can't help but share in the joy of that transformation. We can't help but to share the joy of that transformation with other people. In other words, we're so excited because of this gift we have received and the difference it has made in transforming who we are, that we just have to go out and share it with others. It's not something we keep to ourselves. It's not the light we hide under a bushel. It's the light we let shine for the whole world to see. It's a gift. And it's a gift for which we are so thankful that we want to go out and share it with those around us and with our world. And maybe an example here would help. About a month ago, I found out that my very best friend in the world, Leanne, is going to become a grandmother for the first time. I'd gone to her home in Little River to say goodbye to her niece Stacy and her nephew-in-law Jay. Jay has recently retired after a 26-year career in the Navy, and Stacy and Jay were in the process of moving from San Antonio to Iowa so that they could be closer to his family there. Well, my friend Leanne's son Nathan, who I've known since he was Hunter's age, and her daughter-in-law Amy were also there. We were all kind of, the last hurrah with Stacy and Jay, but also helping Leanne settle into her new parsonage. And that Saturday, we kind of were taking a break from doing work around the house and getting boxes unpacked. And so Stacy and Amy and I were all sitting on the couch. Amy was in the middle, and we're just sitting there, and one thing led to another, and Amy says, "Oh, I've got something to show y'all." And so she took out these photographs and handed one to Stacy and one to me. Their first sonogram. And that was the way she announced her pregnancy to the family, which I'm honored to be considered a part. I was excited. I mean, like I said, I've known Nathan since he was 7. He's in his early 30s now. Leanne is my best friend in ministry, my best friend in life. And just to know that soon after she's moved down and lives within 8 miles of her son again, she's going to be a grandma. And I was so excited. I mean, I wanted to just go out and tell everybody that we knew in common. The problem was it was a secret. Because Amy's grandmother, who is in her mid-80s, didn't know yet. Nana, Patsy Luna, didn't know. She had lost her husband within the last year. They'd been married for 60 years. And not long after Amy and Nathan got married, Edward passed away. And so they wanted to wait to the second sonogram to make sure that everything was developing as it's supposed to before they told Nana and some other members of the extended family. So I was like on strict lockdown. Do not breathe a word of this to anyone. I couldn't even tell my own mom. And if you know me, that is a hard thing for me to do. But I didn't do it. I didn't, Mom, did I? I didn't tell. Until it went public, I was not to tell anybody. So we go to preachers' meetings together. We are with other mutual friends together. And I'm just like, oh, and it feels so bad. I want to share your news, your excitement, your joy. And I couldn't until, of course, it went public. I was so excited for Amy and Nathan, and I was so excited for the end that I literally was busting at the seams. And I started thinking about that, and what if this same kind of unbridled enthusiasm characterized our relationship with God? What if we were as eager to share the good news of what God is doing in our lives as I was to share Amy and Nathan's news about the pending child they're going to have? And what if we actually acted out that excitement? Can you imagine the difference that can make in the lives of others, people we know, people we may not know, if we acted out of that enthusiasm? That if God's presence in our life made us so joyous that we wanted to go out and share it to make a difference in the world in which we live? And what effect might that have on our overall interaction with the world? What would we be more willing to do in terms of works of kindness or mercy for others? How about when it comes to speaking out about injustice, wherever we may encounter it in our day-to-day lives? Would it change the way we treat God's creation at all? Would it affect the way we spend our time, our money, or even cast our votes? You know, it seems to me that changing the world is a daunting big idea. And I don't know about you, but when I think about transforming the world, I just kind of shirk back and think, oh yeah, but what can I do? But you know, we don't all have to be Martin Luther Kings or Mother Teresa's to affect real positive change in the world in which we live. We don't even have to be Richard Stearns, who wrote the book we just read, A Hole in Our Gospel. Some of us, Barbara and some others, read that book as a part of the missions thing. Richard Stearns is a man who, believe it or not, gave up a lucrative position as the CEO of Linux Corporation, Linux like in fine China, to answer the call to go and be the CEO of World Vision, a nonprofit that goes into the poorest of poor places in the world, to third world countries, and they encounter starving children, and they make sure that they get fed. He gave up a life of luxury, not to live in poverty, because he still makes a decent living, and he'll be the first to tell you that, correct? Mm-hmm. But he gave up a very nice life to answer God's call to go out and make a difference to the least, the last, the lost. But you know what? We don't even have to do that. That's not what God is asking most of us to do. Change can and often does begin with small acts of kindness, with acts of mercy, or with working for justice on a local level. The great Dalai Lama, who I just adore, once said, if you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito in the room. I love that. If you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito in the room. And as one who attracts every mosquito within a 5-mile radius, that hit home. And as I was working on the sermon series over the last couple of weeks, I came across that and I wrote it down because I thought, oh man, that says it all. Each of us has a role to play. Each of us can make a difference. Even here in our small church, There are so many opportunities to get involved, to do something, opportunities where you can make a difference in the life of someone else. You can be a part of the care team for the care communities. Those of us on Team Faith, is that the name of our team? I mean, the difference we've seen in our care partner over the couple of years we've been working with him now. And I have to say, our team does most of that work. I don't do that much. 3 years? The difference we've seen come about in his life, in large part because of the relationships he's formed with our team, and our team helping him. And again, most of that happens by the other team members and not so much by me. But, I mean, it makes a difference. Or maybe helping out once a month with Feed 5000 that's hosted by the Lutheran Church in Hutto, that offers a free meal to anybody in the community who just wants to come and have a hot meal. No strings attached. Driving for Meals on Wheels. Assisting with the Justice for Our Neighbors immigration clinics that Mark Brooks helps facilitate through his role as our, what are you, the comrade, not comrade, the chairperson of our Methodist Federation for Social Action. Participating in food drives like we're going to do next Sunday, where we give food to the Hutto Food Pantry in the Round Rock Area Serving Center, helping stock the snack pack pantry at Union Hill Elementary. What is it you told me, 70% of the kids are below the poverty level? And so the thought of them having to come to school and during snack time not have a snack, I mean, I don't know about you, but that breaks my heart. And don't let me forget to give you the package or box of stuff I bought. It's in my car. I mean, but you know, just periodically when you go to Sam's or Costco or even to H-E-B, pick up a healthy snack, individual snacks, and bring it and give it to Jen. She's the assistant principal there. And make a difference, a small difference in the life of a hungry child. I mean, there's so many things that we do. Coats for Kids coming up starting next week. I mean, there are kids in our community that on those cold days, and yes, admittedly, we don't have a lot of those here in Round Rock, but sometimes when it's bitter cold and you're out waiting to catch the bus, you need adequate clothes, adequate coats for warmth. So, you know, pass down those gently used coats and make a difference. Our Brown Santa, that's one of the things we love to do here, and we do it well. Making a difference in the lives of kids who aren't as fortunate as some of our kids are. Giving generously to Encore, like this morning's United Methodist Committee on Relief, this morning's communion offering, to help people who are victims of natural disasters. Even marching in the Pride Parade, I mean, that's a way of making a difference and changing the world. We handed out, I think, about 500 bottles of water on the parade route that had the name of our church on them, and we handed out about 500 of those rubber bracelets that said, "I am a child of God," and our church's website on the other side. You know, and who knows? I mean, some of you, Carol, Mickey, y'all are here because of one of our years we participated in Pride. I mean, you don't know what. But even if no one ever comes to church from our participating in Pride, that's really not the point. The point is saying to people who for years have had the church say to them, you don't matter, you're less than, you're second class because of your sexual orientation, because of whom you love. It's us going out there as a church and saying to people, you know what, that's wrong. The church is wrong. The church has been wrong. We accept you. We love you. God loves you. And that's the most important message of all. And you know, and people thanked us as we went down the Pride Parade route this year, as they do every year. They thanked us for sharing the fact that they're not second-class citizens, that God loves all of us the same. You know, serving as foster parents. We have a number of foster parents in this church. We've been blessed by that. Serving as foster parents is a calling, a ministry, and it's a way of making a difference. It may only be 1 or 2 children, it may be more, but I guarantee you the foster parents we have in this congregation change those kids' lives forever. There's an opportunity to sign up to participate in the Austin AIDS Walk that's coming up in October. You know, the list goes on and on. There's so many things we can do that don't necessarily take a lot of time or a lot of money. Although if you have a lot of time or a lot of money, I'm sure we could use that too. But there are just so many things that we can do to make a difference. As we Christians who have been transformed by the love of God in Jesus the Christ, turn around and offer that love to others in an effort to transform, bit by bit, the world in which you live, a fallen, broken world that needs God's love and that needs God's children to be about the business of loving one another. One of the things I hope that we're going to do soon, and Barbara and I are going to talk about this, is there's still 50 houses in Taylor that have not been rehabbed since last year's floods. Corps still has them and ready to work on, and they've got volunteers and mission teams set up, and I'm hoping that we will set up one Saturday a volunteers and mission team to go from Journey of Faith and work on one of those houses. One Saturday. I know we're all busy, but one Saturday we can go back and give to someone in our community who needs our help. And again, most of these are small things, but when you add them all together, they add up. But one more thing I want to say, I think that doing these kinds of things are best when they come as a natural outgrowth of our relationship with God, when they are an expression of our gratitude for God's free gift of salvation, the gift of God's grace that is already at work in us. And I also believe that requires us to do more work on our own discipleship, our own individual relationship with God, and also as a church. Because what we need to do is we need to get to that point where we can barely contain the excitement we feel over the good news, the transformation that God has done in our own lives, and that we're bursting at the seams to share that grace, that love, that mercy with other people. And one of the ways of doing that is by participating in small groups. But we're going to talk more about that last week, because I think I've said enough today and we're really getting time to go home. But just remember, you can make a difference. Just like that mosquito